Welcome to a very special edition of 805 Sports Talk. This is our first episode of our second season, and we got a lot to get into with the high school football season coming up Friday night. So we're going to get right into it, and we're going to start with the marquee matchup Friday night, which is Lompoc playing at Arroyo Grande. Lompoc obviously went 12-1 last season, lost in the semifinals. AG went 10-2, lost to Valencia. And Kenny, you'll be at Doug Hitchens Stadium Friday night. You've been kind of preparing your capsules, which you run every Friday, breaking down all the matchups. So what do you think about this game Friday night between the Braves and the Eagles?
Well, in terms of people coming back, the edge definitely goes to Lompoc. They have, for starters, Toatawa. He rushed for, I believe, 1,777 yards last year. He, Dallas Canley, and Ruben Cortez combined for a little over 2,700 yards. They're all back. Not to mention Shamar Savage, who's a two-way leader at wide receiver and defensive back. Their offensive line usually figures to be as capable as usual. Arroyo Grande lost a lot to graduation, but the Eagles do have James Gilmet, who was their leading rusher, back last year. They have a capable kicker, Colton Thieker, I believe. He figures to be able to keep Lompoc pinned deep in his territory with his kickoff, which will help the Eagles a lot. Nonetheless, I figure the edge goes to the Braves in this one. Good analysis.
Now, Lorenzo, I don't think anybody knows the Lompoc football team as well as you do, but you'll be at Houck Stadium Friday night to see Cabrillo take on. But I want to hear your thoughts on how you think Lompoc is going to do against AG Friday night. What are your expectations for that game?
I like Lompoc's chances as well. I just feel like that there's just way too much experience on the Braves side. I mean, granted, yeah, they're going to Doug Hitchens Stadium. Traditionally, they have had their struggles there, but I want to point out one X factor in this game, and that's the guy I profiled on Monday and also in the Wednesday record, Juan DeLuna. He's actually the old guy on the defensive line as a junior, but Andrew Jones likes this guy a lot, says he has very explosive hands at the nose guard position. If he gets going and he opens up like the defensive line for the Braves, I mean, it's just going to free up so much space for Jelani Henderson, Toatawa, Ruben Cortez, all those guys. So I just feel like right now the edge goes to Lompoc.
Yeah, we talk about a lot of returners for Lompoc, so I would probably wager to guess that the Braves will be the favorites, but you never know playing AG at Doug Hitchens Stadium, especially with Mike Hartman taking over there. This is his first game, so they're definitely going to be amped up for this. And you mentioned James Gilmet. He might be the best running back in SLO County this year, so definitely keep an eye out for that guy. I think that's going to be a great game. It usually is. Sometimes it's low scoring, sometimes it's high scoring, so who knows what you're going to get, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be a close game.
One thing about Hartman, though, he's an experienced head coach, a lot of years at St. Joe, and he's been on the Arroyo Grande staff for the last several years, so he's familiar with these kids. It's not as though he's coming in brand new. He has continuity on his side, but Andrew Jones just reloads, so I think AG is going to have another great year. Last year they lost 2 games, and unfortunately for them, one of those was to Lompoc, and I don't see that changing this year.
All right, and the game I'll be at Friday night is at Rigetti. The Warriors are hosting Morro Bay, non-league game. Rigetti obviously went 1-9 last season. Morro Bay started out 4-0, but ended up 4-6. So it's an interesting matchup, and I'm actually really excited for this one. I want to see how Rigetti looks this year after going 1-9. There's obviously some higher hopes at this time of the year with the chance to kind of make up for what happened last year. And Rigetti does return quite a bit. I think they have about 18 to 20 returning players, some of them starters. I think the offensive line is going to be improved. I'm thinking they could have a big year at quarterback with Brandon Giddings starting at quarterback. He's new, but he seems like an athlete, and their passing game was pretty bad last year, so I think having some fresh blood in there, some new blood in there can kind of improve things. I want to see how Jalen Davis looks this year, probably the most explosive playmaker at Rigetti. He's going to be a guy to keep an eye on Friday night, so I want to see him. And someone we haven't mentioned a whole lot this year is Anthony Porcho, a returner to that Rigetti defense. He had some nice numbers last year, and talking to Rigetti coaches and other players about what to expect out of Rigetti, I hear Porcho's name mentioned a lot, so I think he's going to be good. They do have some pieces on defense. Austin Dacis, who kind of dealt with injuries last year, he's back. He's healthy. He's going to have an impact. Derek Heimel can run the ball. He's going to be a factor on defense as well. And probably the player on defense I want to see the most is Caleb Thomas. He broke his leg, I think, against Bishop Diego last year, pretty much at the first game of the season, missed the rest of the year, broken tibia. He's back. He's a force. This guy's about 6'3", over 250 pounds, a middle linebacker. He can also play a little bit of tight end. So, I'm excited for what Righetti will do this year. I think they're going to be the favorites against Morro Bay. Morro Bay did start 4-0. They had a rough time in the Northern League, and after that 4-0 start. So I think Righetti has to win Friday night, get off to a strong start, and kind of carry that into the St. Joseph game, which we'll be broadcasting next week. So a big game for Righetti at home against Morro Bay. It might not be a marquee matchup, but there's a lot of intrigue in that game with Ed Herman coming off a 1-9 season. Now we'll move to the Frontier at Cabrillo game, Bakersfield Frontier. They're coming all the way from the Valley over to Houck Stadium. And Lorenzo, that's where you'll be to see AJ Pateras' debut, his new Cabrillo squad over there. What do you think that game, how do you think that game is going to play out?
Well, here's the interesting thing, because we mentioned Pateras and his coaching debut. Frontier is bringing in a new head coach themselves. I mean, Chris Bandy, who was a longtime assistant at Ridgeview High, which is a traditional powerhouse in the Bakersfield area. You'll probably see some read option on Frontier side. They seem pretty deep in the backfield with Connor Getman and Ty Johnson, but just the vibe I've gotten being at Vandenberg Village is that the players just seem more enthusiastic, and I mean, they're very football driven, and it's because of the fact that Pateras has been mentored by guys like Tim Garcia and Brad Stewart, who are two legends in Ventura High. So, there's a lot of intrigue, a lot of enthusiasm for Pateras and a Pateras-led team. So, I like Cabrillo in this contest. I think the long trip from Frontier may play a role.
Yeah, I think Frontier has traveled to Houck Stadium before. I think they played Lompoc before, and I think there's some Houck connections between the Frontier program and over there at Lompoc. So they're a little familiar with playing in Lompoc, but they played Lompoc in the past. So who knows if that'll play a factor Friday night. But I like your analysis, and I think Cabrillo should, at least perform better than what they did at the start of last year. I don't know if they're favored to win. Frontier is a pretty good Bakersfield program, but I'm sure AJ Pateras will have those guys ready to start this season off on the right foot.
The thing is, though, is that Frontier has some question marks at quarterback. They went with a rotation last year, but those guys graduated, and Frontier was 2-9 last year. So there's question marks at quarterback, but Sean Wood has been named the starter, and Cabrillo is already familiar with Sean Wood's game, especially at the QB position. So I feel like that edge goes to Cabrillo.
Yeah, and I know the Conks did have a little juggling there at the quarterback position last year, so it's good that they kind of have that nailed down this year. I think they had Izzy Hernandez and J.C. Miller last year, so Sean Wood is the guy at Cabrillo, so good luck to him and the rest of the Conks Friday night, starting their season off at Houck Stadium. Now we'll move back over to SLO County at Nipomo. That's where Pioneer Valley is playing. A big matchup last year. We started our broadcast season with the Nipomo at PV game, but now, Elliot, you'll be at Nipomo Friday night. They host the Panthers. Always an interesting matchup. I think they're pretty closely, rated teams, I would guess. Nick Robledo was Nipomo's quarterback, and now he's at Pioneer Valley. He might see some playing time at quarterback for the Panthers. How do you feel about that matchup?
Well, this is going to be a good game. These are two teams that have a lot of new players, so things are just not settled for either one of them. Like you said, last year's Nipomo starting quarterback is now on the Pioneer Valley squad, but he's not necessarily going to be the starter because they've got their starting quarterback from last year, Matthew Garcia, coming back, and he's a strong-armed senior. So Robledo may get into the game, but I'm seeing that Garcia is going to lead that offense. But Pioneer Valley started last year 3-1, but went 0-4 in the Los Padres League, ended up 4-6 overall. They've got 6 or 7 sophomores who are probably going to start this year. So they're going to be working a whole lot of new kids into the mix, and their numbers are down. They're only going to have somewhere around 40 kids on the entire team. So that's not going to help them from a stamina standpoint, where some of these kids are going to have to play a lot of minutes and a lot of time on both sides of the ball. But Nipomo, they won the Northern League last year, 4-0, but they lost their starting quarterback. So now they've got a new guy, sophomore Braden Groshart, who has got the inside track to lead the team. They've got some returning skill players, but they also have a lot of turnover. So this one's kind of up in the air, where which team can rebuild quickest. And of course, we say this all the time, but that's what the preseason is for. You know that Tony Dodge always has something up his sleeve. It's only his third year as the head coach, but he's been on the squad, just like we talked about Mike Hartman before. He was promoted from within, so he's been familiar with that program for a number of years, and he always seems to have a trick or two, and he's not sure whether he's going to have more of a running game or a passing game, but he has some kind of game planned, and he doesn't want to give it away too early. So I'm thinking Nipomo's got the edge here. They'll be home. They'll be ready to go. They'll have a new quarterback, and Pioneer Valley has an experienced quarterback. They've got a lot of skill players back, the wide receivers and running backs, so they could put up some numbers. But I just hate to rule out or vote against Tony Dodge coming up with some kind of scheme that will slow Pioneer Valley down and give his kids an edge. Could be the best matchup of the night of two teams that are basically in a rebuilding mode. But they're going to be so close. I'm excited to go see this game.
I think Nipomo is going to be better than some people think. They do lose a lot, but I think Gage Wynn, Jadu Matuate Reyes is back, Elias Pua is back, so they do have some pieces there, and they got some guys on defense that can play. So I think Nipomo is going to be better than some people think. I know their numbers were down a little bit, but I think they're going to be pretty good. They're going to be tough to beat in the Northern League. I think Santa Maria and Nipomo are going to clash this year atop the Northern League standings, but I think Nipomo is going to be pretty good. But I would pick PV in this game. I think they're going to be pretty good as well. I know the LPL is tough for them, but I think they're going to have another pretty good preseason run this year. The quarterback, they got two experienced quarterbacks. Some people say if you have two quarterbacks, you really don't have any, but I don't think that's the case with PV. They're both pretty equal, pretty good quarterbacks, so I think they have two options there. Michael Bourbon's a good receiver. Emmanuel Alcantar can run the ball. Kenneth Huberry is going to be strong in the back of that defense, so I would pick PV in that game, but like you said, it's pretty much a toss-up.
I think it might be like it was 2 years ago. If Pioneer Valley can stay out of its own way, that is, avoiding penalties and so forth, that I see them winning a close one. The thing was, 2 years ago, they did not stay out of their own way.
Yeah.
They outplayed Nipomo for most of the game, but they lost because of penalties and mistakes. So I think that will be a big factor. Actually.
Here's one thing about Nick Robledo crossing over to Pioneer Valley. He probably has some inside information on Nipomo and its game plans and strengths and all that. So whether he plays or not, I mean, I'm sure Pioneer Valley's going to pick his brain.
Yeah, that's going to be fun to see. Either way, just going to his old high school and facing his old team. That's always an interesting scenario.
Think about Robledo. Coach Sean Ruiz said if he doesn't get the starting quarterback job, a big plus for Pioneer Valley is Robledo can play other positions. So one way or another, he's going to be an asset. Yeah, he can run the ball. I think they can actually both run the ball, Matthew Garcia and Robledo. Sticking over there in San Luis Obispo County, that's where the Santa Maria Saints are playing at Slow High School Friday night. That's going to be an interesting matchup. The Saints started the year last year with a big win over Slow, then they won another game against Santa Barbara, and we know they ended up 5-5. So I think this is a really big game for the Saints. The expectations have changed this year. They're not sneaking up on anybody this year with some of the pieces they've got back. That three-headed monster, Bobby Ruiz, Isaiah Garcia, and Blake Truitt at quarterback, not really sneaking up on anybody. Jonathan Ramos is healthy. He's going to be a monster from what I'm hearing this year. Gabriel Bravo is a stud on that offensive line. So Santa Maria is stacked. So they got some expectations. I think Slow is going to be a little bit better this year. They have to be. Rigetti got its only win against Slow, and Slow is pretty much maybe the worst team in the area. So I think Slow might be better, but Santa Maria's not going to be sneaking up on anybody this year. So they got to kind of make a statement Friday night playing at Slow, get their season off to a really impressive start. So it may not be the toughest matchup the Saints have this year, but starting the season right is huge. So they got to play well against Slow, and it's not going to be easy. That's a Pac-5 team, so they have some playmakers. So Santa Maria has to come out and just make a statement Friday night that they're not going to mess around this year, that they are going to be kind of a force to be reckoned with. So I expect Santa Maria to come out fired up Friday night. Well, Santa Maria has – oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No.
I think Santa Maria really, frankly, has all the advantages going to this one. Yes, they had a good degree last year, but they're going to be going in a little ticked off too, right?
Yeah. Right.
Because they had their best season years, probably thought they deserved the playoff spot, three-way tie for second in the league. They didn't get in. Frankly, I think San Luis Obispo is limping into the year. They were winless last year. I think they will be better than they were last year. They have a reliable back, Pearson Mosachuk, returning. But it was close last year. Frankly, barring them foreseeing, I don't think it'll be close this time. It should be San Maria's game all the way if they play the way they are capable of.
Coach Dan Ellington has these kids on his page. They bought into the program last year. They were 5-5. I think they're going to be playing with a bit of a chip on their shoulder. They could have been 8-2, so they've got to learn how to close out some games, which I think the experience of last year will help them with. But I think that they got robbed. So did San Ynez on the playoffs. San Ynez has had 2 great seasons in a row and hasn't made the playoffs. But Santa Maria had its best season in years and didn't make it. And I think they're going to be playing with a chip on their shoulder. And the CIF, by the way, came out with its first preseason polls this week, and they've got Santa Maria ranked pretty high in their division. So they're getting the notice of the voters, the coaches that vote for these things, even before the season begins. I'm thinking that, Slow's going to be better, but better than they were, but not enough to beat Santa Maria this year.
Santa Maria and San Ynez has got to be the 2 most irate football teams heading into this upcoming year. And, one of the things that really stuck out to me about Santa Maria is that there's just so much confidence from the Saints team, and I haven't seen that in years. And you went there. I don't know if you've even seen this much confidence on the Saints football side.
There's definitely a level of confidence, but I think also what stands out is that level of talent that they had. I mentioned a guy like Jonathan Ramos. He's really not on anyone's radar too much, but this guy's a legit star. Talking to Ellington, he says he might be our best player this year, and and you have to get through Bobby Ruiz, Blake Truitt, and Isaiah Garcia first before you even start thinking about Ramos. So they're stacked. You mentioned the confidence, but that talent level is off the charts. So I think they had some talent last year. They do lose a little bit at receiver with Angel Esparza and Ricky Mendoza going away. Jesus Pacheco was a stud on defense last year. They do lose some pieces, but that talent is seriously there this year. And I think a lot of those guys from last year have gotten better. I think Blake Truitt's going to be better this year. He didn't really have a summer program before the start of last season, so he's going to be better this year. And I think Santa Maria should be across the board a much better team than the 5-5 team from last year. And I think they should dominate slow. They don't want to mess around and it be closer than it should be. They're ranked 6th in Division 12, in the preseason polls, and I think they could have been higher. I would expecting them to be top 3. So I know there's some good private schools in that division, but Santa Maria's 6th in Division 12, and I think a big showing Friday night will have them moved up, once the season starts moving along. Moving to the final 2 teams, Santa Ynez and St. Joseph, 2 LPL teams. Santa Ynez hosts San Marcos Friday night, and Lorenzo, you did a preview story on Santa Ynez. I think you're pretty high on them. What do you think? And San Marcos isn't much of a matchup. We probably won't spend too much time on that one with how much San Marcos has struggled going 0-10 last year. What do you expect out of Santa Ynez, not only Friday night, but throughout this season?
Well, I'll start by saying this. I think this game's going to end in the first quarter. I'll just put it out there now. This Santa Ynez team ridiculously stacked. You lose Mike McCoy, but 19 returning starters out of 22. And they're coming back from a team that not only went 8-2, but as we mentioned, missed the playoffs. So they're going to have that edge. And I know San Marcos might be considered like a scrimmage, so to speak, but I wouldn't doubt that Santa Ynez is definitely going to be focused and dialed in, and they want to take it out on the Royals firsthand.
Yeah, McClurg always has those guys ready to play, and I think the last couple of years they played San Marcos, it's been like 54-0 or something like that. So I think that's the kind of result you can expect Friday night. But Dustin Gregg at quarterback, it's a big game for him to get some reps in, get that game rep at quarterback in a game situation. He had some reps last year backing up McCoy, but it's a big game for Gregg to kind of get in a rhythm, start the season. I think Santa Ynez is going to roll over San Marcos, but it's a big game for them and just for their players to kind of get acclimated, even though they don't have too many holes to fill with 19 returning starters from last year. Finally, another LPL team with the biggest road trip going over to Sherman Oaks is St. Joseph. They're playing at Sherman Oaks Notre Dame. Battle of the Knights. They hosted Notre Dame last year, and it was a pretty close game. St. Joseph had that brutal preseason schedule with St. Bonnie and Notre Dame, but it's a big game for Jim Chavala starting his career at St. Joseph. So we'll see how the Knights do playing over there in Sherman Oaks against a really good Notre Dame team, one of the powers of Southern California. They're usually up and down, usually Division II team, sometimes Division I. Lorenzo, you think the Knights have any chance against Notre Dame? What are your expectations for that game?
Absolutely, because here's one thing, actually two things I want to point out involving Notre Dame. Two of their top players were Kalon Wilborn, an Arizona commit, and Tyler Asamoah, that 6'4" receiver. Those guys are gone. So it's a very, very young team. St. Joseph, to me, has the experience on its side, especially offensively with Mason Bealey back at wide receiver, Dino Maldonado also back. Yeah, they're having to replace C.J. Cole, but I just feel like that in Jim Chavala's first team, the experience edge is on the offensive side of the football, which, him being a defensive guy, it gives him so much peace knowing that he has one side of the ball already taken care of. So I actually do like St. Joseph's chances.
Yeah, we talk about statement games, and I think the team with the chance to make the biggest statement could be St. Joseph. If they go down to Sherman Oaks and beat Notre Dame, that could be one of those games that kind of sends shockwaves. Like St. Joseph might be for real this year, and they're in Division 5. Tough division with Paraclete at the top of that division, but they're ranked in that division. I think they're 5th in Division 5, something like that. They get a win at Sherman Oaks Notre Dame Friday night. They could definitely jump up there. That's a pretty good division for them, even though Paraclete is completely fully loaded. So maybe they can jump up those rankings and kind of send a statement. What do you guys think about St. Joseph's chances?
I agree with you. It's going to be a close game this time around, and I like St. Joe for exactly what Lorenzo said. Their offense has got a head start. They got a lot of guys back. C.J. Cole was a stud, but I think every team has turnover, and Notre Dame has lost a couple of their studs too. So that's a wash. I'm kind of liking St. Joe. That I think the score would be close. 21-17 or something in that range. But I'm going to give St. Joe the benefit of the doubt this year and say they're going to get off to that strong start, and that could just springboard them into a wonderful season.
I believe I actually picked St. Joseph in a close one as well. I think they'll be able to handle a long bus ride. Notre Dame came up here and won last year. And I agree with you guys pretty much. I think they'll have enough on the offensive side of the ball. I think Notre Dame, probably plays some tougher competition overall than St. Joseph does, just because of their location. But I think the Knights will have just enough to win a close one.
Okay.
No, it's from St. Joseph.
Yeah.
That is.
They're both nicknamed the Knights. One last game on the 8-man side. Orchid Academy starts its season against L.A. Price at Pioneer Valley Friday night. Lorenzo, I'll start with you since you did the preview story on Orchid Academy. We saw them at Media Day. I think they're pretty impressive physically. Darren Miller's a big kid. Alex Andrade's a big, strong kid. You don't see too many of those big kids on 8-man side. What do you think Orchid Academy is going to do this year, and how do you think they're going to start off their season?
We talk about the guys like Toa Tower, Shamar Savage, Blake Truitt, but Darren Miller, to me, deserves some recognition. I mean, he is a very, very explosive quarterback, especially as a dual threat, and his presence, Alex Andrade also coming back, and that size and depth on Orchid Academy's side. I definitely like the Spartans' chances in this game, and it's kind of like a tune-up game before they head against Mojave, the reigning 8-man Division I champs.
Yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun, and we're planning to broadcast an 8-man game this year and that Mojave game, so that'll be a lot of fun. You mentioned Darren Miller. I don't think I've ever seen an 8-man quarterback with his size, strength, and speed, over 6'3", and it's going to be interesting what he does after Orchid Academy, because I think he wants to play college football. He has those physical tools. Will he play somewhere at the FCS level? Will he go to a powerful JUCO route? And will he get adapted to the 11-man game? He's going to be an interesting story to watch unfold with his post-high school career and what he wants to do with football, because he has all those physical tools. Who knows what he wants to do? Playing at FCS, maybe somehow he can go from JUCO to D1. So you don't see too many 8-man guys play at that high of level. So that's going to be interesting to see, especially for a quarterback. Now, Elliot, you followed Orchid Academy a lot over the last years. What do you think they're going to do this year?
I just like this. I'm the guy that likes 8-man football the most. I go to more 8-man games, I think, than I do 11s. But I really like Orchid Academy's team. I just see them coming back year after year with a lot of talent. They play heads up. They're well conditioned. That Orchid Academy is actually bigger than St. Joseph, but they, by law or school rules, they can only have up to 550 students, so it can never grow past that. And one of their problems is they're never quite sure who has been accepted into Orchid Academy until right before the school year begins. So that's always a guessing game. But they got plenty of talent coming back, and I think they're going to make the playoffs, and I think they'll easily get by Price. Nice school. Only high school I've ever been to that has loge boxes for the in the basketball gymnasium, and it's right across the street from like the USC campus. It's in that location in Los Angeles, and so they've got some talent. They've always field talented teams, but I just like watching the Orchid Academy play year in and year out. They're consistent, and I think that consistency will show. It's the game against Mojave that we're going to broadcast that, and that's the one that I'm really looking forward to, because that's the team to beat. That's every year in and year out. They've been the D1 power in 8-man football, and they're going to play them early, so we'll know how they stack up against the big boys. But I see them having another successful season, and the Price is just going to be the first win on a 6, 7, 8 win season. They only play 9 games in 8-man maximum. So if they can get by Mojave, they could go undefeated. So we'll see, though. But I think they're going to start off with a win.
Okay. That's all we got for this week. Be sure to check us out Friday online, on Twitter, on Facebook. We'll be all over the Central Coast covering football games as the high school football season is finally here with week 0. So thank you guys for tuning in to 805 Sports Talk, and we'll catch you next week.